First of all, lads, am I right in saying what happened to Bridget Cleary? He did the dirty on her, did he?
He killed her, yeah. He burnt her to death in her own house, and he got all her cousins and her father to help him out. She was 26 years old. She was a very beautiful young girl. She was a typical peasant housewife from that period. She helped finance the family through selling eggs, through making clothes, things like that. One day in 1895, right, she went to visit a cousin of hers to deliver some eggs. She had to wait around a few hours to deliver those eggs, and she got a bit of a cold. She went home and she took to her bed. A few days later, the doctor called, and he said it was okay. She was a little bit emotionally disturbed, but he was used to that. She had had a few mental problems years earlier. And then a few days later, the priest called, and he said she was okay as well, the same problem. Then a cousin of hers, Patrick Dunne, called to see her, and he said, "Oh, she's too fine. It's not Bridget Cleary. It's somebody else. Bridget Cleary has been taken away and replaced by a fairy changeling." Now this set her husband, Michael Cleary, into motion. He got very, very upset, and he decided that he would exorcise the fairy changeling from his beloved wife.
And they managed to hold her over a fire on several occasions, did they not? And they threw potions at her as well.
Heading up towards St. Patrick's Day, 1895, on one Friday, Michael got all the neighbours into the house, and he started questioning Bridget as to whether she was the real Bridget Cleary. He said,
I think it was at this time that he sent for a local herb doctor, a man who had the cures and who was well versed in fairy lore. And he came along. His name was Gainey. And as it happened subsequently, I think the family changed their name in the area. But he arrived along and he prescribed all sorts of concoctions, which had to be taken orally and applied.
What kind of concoctions, Eamon?
There was one evil-smelling brew that was based in milk and using various herbs. Some of the herbs haven't been described in any of the texts we've found. And then there was some awful mixture of hen's excrement and urine and so on that was smeared over her naked body, and it was fairly horrendous stuff.
That was supposed to do wonders, was it?
And this was meant to drive away the demon also.
Sounds like it would cure anything, as a matter of fact, yeah. Well, is there any relevance in all of this today, either of you, both of you?
You have a young girl, pretty young girl, married, happily married to her husband. She's seemingly faultless. I mean, we don't think that she was a witch or a fairy changeling. We think she had certain little mental problems or certain social problems, or perhaps she was a healer. And the people in her closed community decided that it was worse than that. And this still happens today. I mean, you had a case this year which outraged the country of a young man being kicked to death in Fairview Park because some other people decided that he was a homosexual. And I don't know whether he was or not. And I don't particularly care. I don't care whether Bridget Cleary was a fairy changeling or not either. It has that relevance, and it has several other relevances as well.
Do you mean, Joe, that anybody who is slightly different is looked upon with suspicion? Is that it?
That is one layer, and there is an even more important layer of violence in Irish society, which we have had ample evidence of in the last few days, which is still with us. I mean, it would be convenient to say that since Victorian times things have improved, but I don't see any real evidence of that. And I feel that the Bridget Cleary story, partly because it's about an outsider, a woman who I can't tell what sort of an outsider she was, but there was something unusual about her. She was persecuted for that. I think it is relevant to us today.
Yes, Eamon, would either of you be into the psychic phenomena field? I mean, do you believe this kind of thing?
Well, we've both read widely on the subject.
Indeed you have.
I think most of us, I think everybody at home and in the audience, are aware of a sixth sense or a premonition of somebody going to ring up and the phone rings, or meet a friend that they haven't seen for some time and walk around the corner and lo and behold somebody's there. As an extension of that, we sort of started to investigate, and we'd stumbled. Well, the Bridget Cleary story I think is fairly widely known, but I think it's the folklore account that's widely known. And it was only when Joe and I got chatting about it about a year ago that we realised, in fact, there was much more to it. There was an awful lot left unsaid in the popular account, and it was then that we started to do some research. And as we did so, we began to realise that it was an incredibly gruesome story. It wasn't a fairy story as we had originally believed, because there is a child skipping song still in the area.
About Bridget Cleary.
About Bridget Cleary. Really? Are you a witch, are you a fairy, or are you the wife of Bridget Cleary?
Yeah.
And And it was people had accepted it on that level, and it was almost like a fun fairy story. But it was only when we started to delve into it that we began to realise that there were very powerful emotions at work here.
Did either of you find out what happened to him, the husband, Michael Cleary? Did he serve his sentence?
He went to jail for 20 years in Clonmel. And
interestingly enough, I think for manslaughter, not actually for
manslaughter.
Because, naturally enough, he didn't think he had killed his wife. He thought he'd got rid of a fairy, and immediately after the death he was full of guilt, and his father and her father was full of guilt, and they realised that they had killed the person who had kept their family going through thick and thin.
Did he do the 20 years,
He did do the 20 years.
And then what?
But by that time there had been a war of independence, a civil war, all the records had been burnt, and I really don't know all that much about it. It is Bridget we're concerned about, but I don't know that much.
But you'd love to know what happened to him. Did he ever come out? Did he get married again? Did he have children?
I would love to know what relationship he had with his community. I know that the father of Bridget Cleary, Patrick Boland, got out of jail shortly after his jail sentence started and returned to live in the community. And I don't think any great sort of sense of crime attached to the people.
Yes.
Because, I mean, they were part of a shared folk tradition.
Of course, and I suppose it was a brutal time and a brutal place.
It was. Tipperary at that time, I've looked up the statistics. I come from Tipperary, so I say this as a neutral person. It was the most violent county in Ireland. There were more outrages of an agrarian, political and social nature in that county than any other part of the country. And when I was going through the newspaper files looking up Bridget, I kept coming across cases of assault which I mistook for the story I was looking for, and I kept coming across cases of husbands attacking their wives, and indeed vice versa.
And indeed vice versa.
Indeed.
Get that bit in, make sure, yes, it happens both ways. Do you think that people still believe in these old pishos about changelings and fairies and things?
I think the changeling in particular is a very common belief. When I was inside in a cafe in the city centre telling somebody about this story, and I was interrupted by two working class women from Dublin who told me that there was a lad living down in the Liberties who had been taken. He was a changeling. He was a fairy. His mother had brought him to the Phoenix Park in 1902, and she went away for a minute. I don't know what she went away to do. She left him in the pram, and when she came back she had a fairy changeling. But I was told that he was okay, he was a nice lad, and that he wasn't simple or anything, and that he was just accepted as a fairy changeling today in Dublin. And I'm sure, I don't know what the audience thinks, but I know that throughout the country there are stories of fairy changelings who are indeed still alive.
Yeah. We've no changelings in the audience tonight. Two of them look
they won't admit to it anyway.
No, of course
nobody wants to be burnt to death. I mean,
it was the last witch burning in Europe, wasn't it?
Well, it became known as the last witch burning in Europe. We think erroneously because the phrase witch was being used and bandied around in court, and of course the press picked up on it.